Hey everyone, welcome to GoB Bacon. I'm your host Jake Roberts, and this is going to be a really cool show. And already, right off the bat, I see some really great people already popping in. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Dean, good to see you as always. Oh, Deidre, Jeff, hey guys, thanks for coming in. So this is a real treat tonight, or this afternoon, actually. We have a guest who is an author, researcher, and has some really interesting information that does overlap with what we like to cover here on the Ghosts of Bacon. And so we're going to go ahead and bring on my co-host. You all know him. His name's John Edwards. He did a wonderful interview with me here a few weeks back. And so I'm going to bring in John. Hey, John. Yep, you're still muted there. There.
Got you. Hey, Jake, how you doing?
Doing well, sir.
Good.
So,
good.
I just said that, you don't really need much of an introduction. You were just here a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But everyone's very familiar with, you and the other podcasts that you participate in. So I'm really, really excited to have you here and join me with Gretchen and ask her some questions. Absolutely. And so everyone, let's give Gretchen a great big warm welcome. Hey, Gretchen, welcome to the show.
Hi. It's wonderful to meet you, Jake. John, it's great to be with you again. Nice to be here with your group and followers.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And I have to correct something here because John said that he wanted to have you front and center as a rose between two thorns. So I think if I pull you both back out and pull you both back in a different order, that'll be better for John. Because
I don't mind.
There we go.
Much better, Gretchen. There you go.
Okay, whatever works. Whatever works.
Much better.
So thanks for joining us, Gretchen. And if you would please, if you don't mind giving our viewers a quick rundown, how did you fall into this area of research? And as John and I always term it the rabbit holes that we find ourselves in after we start looking into a lot of this information. And talk to us real quick about your books, because it's such great info, and I know that a lot of our information kind of has an overlap, and it is connected in a lot of ways. And I know that our viewers here at Ghosts of Bacon will definitely be interested in checking it out. So go ahead.
Thank you. Well, that's a huge question you asked me. Lawrence Gardner, author of Bloodline of the Holy Grail, made this subject human for me. And of course, the Templars play a very large part in the Bloodline story. And I was introduced to this in 1995. I have been gripped by it ever since. But the culmination of 9 years of work and years of reading and research formed into this book, my first one. And it's quite a tome. You can use it for self-defense if you'd like. To throw it at a burglar, anything you need to protect yourself. But it's full of resources, 155 images. I'm a very visual person, but so is humanity. And codes are represented in visual form, aren't they? I realized that the Stars of the Magdalene, as this is called, needed to be included in my first book. So this is the revised extended chapter in my revised first book. So this is available if you want a sample of writing, my writing, and what might be included in the larger volume. You could start with this. You also could go to my website, GretchenCornwall.com, sign up for my newsletter. You'll be sent a link, which is a free chapter on Bernard de Clarebo out of this book. And he is a mastermind behind the Templar Knight Order. Not the, but to my knowledge, as of today, I could be wrong, I've probably spent more time speaking about Bernard de Clairvaux than other authors have, and the more I learned about him, the more captivated I was. He was incredible. And of course, I do think that I'm a proponent that the Knights Templar survived 1307. I do think they went to North America, and of course, I went to Wisconsin a few times, and this culminated in that journey. So again, this is full of imagery. I've shifted my work. I'm not working on this project anymore, but this is certainly the start of that. I got that project off to a good start. But there's an amazing array of evidence to show that they were there. And secrets are difficult to unpick, as you both are well know of.
Yeah.
Secret society, but by its very nature, they don't want you to know about them. But I believe and always strive that I have found original content that points to their philosophy at heart amongst the priestly caste, the scholarly caste, and that it was successfully transmitted into the future, which is where I believe Francis Bacon comes in, the Rosicrucians, and of course, Freemasonry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's along our line of thinking as well. What a great overview. Thank you so much. I have a couple of questions for you already, right off the bat. We have some really great viewers here. Jan wants to know who is the publisher, and do you use the same publisher for all of your books? Great question, Jan.
Grapevine Press Limited, and it is mine.
Yeah.
I am my publisher. So you
that,
can find out the ISBN numbers from my website. There are links to Amazon from my website as well. Look up my name on Amazon. It's published in hardback, paperback, Kindle, and
Excellent.
I am looking forward to publishing more works, perhaps even others.
Yeah, excellent. And Jan thanks you. Says great job. One of our regulars, he's been on the show a couple of times with his own research. Amazing work. Jason Mercer asking the question: is there a relation to Clarebo Abbey and the Sinclair family? Of course, you'd ask that.
More than likely. Clairvaux, established by Bernard de Clairvaux, originally was Wormwood Valley. And he changed the name after doing what Cistercians do, which is to take unusable land and completely rework it. It's hard work, but that was one of the ways they made it possible to have an abbey for an aristocrat that wasn't as well funded as higher nobility. So they would give the Cistercian order difficult land. It's not farming land, it's not pasture land. So the order would take it and transform it. So he transformed his valley into Clearview. And Clair, Clair, means clear. And then, of course, you get Sinclair out of that. And there is a genetic link. There is more research, but Don and I have been doing some work on that. I've always thought there was a direct DNA link from the 9 original Knights to the Templars. And we discovered that the other night, didn't we, John? We finally figured that out.
Yeah.
But there's a whole history behind it that I've published already. But John picked down the DNA link. Would you like to go into that, or do you want to hold back?
We can. Well, we can. There is a bit of a link to Flemish origin. We'll just put it that way, and we can go further back. Is that what you're referring to, Gretchen?
Well, basically, you have to look at the people involved, and these individuals knew who they were. And if you were of a noble line, then you passed that memory down.
Yes, correct.
Because it was first remembering. And so we all know that Rollo, the Viking, successful Viking chieftain, became a duke who married the Merovingian princess of Paris, the king of Paris.
Correct.
and became royal, and his duty in exchange was to guard the mouth of the river Seine, Normandy, men of the north, Norsemen, Normandy. That was in 800 something, but his descendant, William the Conqueror, in 1066, the last and greatest Viking, if you will, sailed across the Channel and took the throne of England. About 40 years prior to that, in Newfoundland, a Viking settlement exists that dates back to 1021. It is a ship repair station, Viking. And repair station implies multiple ships. In other words, you need a repair station to handle the traffic coming into the area.
Yep.
So you've got the Vikings in North America and Newfoundland in 1021, having established a repair station. 1066, across the pond, in England, you have their cousin taking the throne of England. So the Viking knowledge flows into not only the crown of England, but also the crown of France, both. And they are cousins.
Correct.
Yep.
One of the mysteries behind this is, might be 2006, I'm getting the date wrong, but an Elizabethan warship had been studied and a navigation box pulled under the water. And this would have been top secret military grade tools of the day. And of course, flowing out of the Elizabethan court of spy masters, right?
Correct.
So this navigation box, this is the stuff of which you would kill for or be killed for. Okay.
Yes.
In it was a Viking sunstone. Now, up until then, it was thought to be a mythical, pseudo-religious object that the Vikings touted as having supernatural capacities, but also practical capacities.
Correct.
So if you take an piece of optical calcite, which is what this was, the Viking sunstone, and the only place you can quarry it is in Norway. So you incise lines on it, and on a cloudy day, you'll be able to find the sun, and you'll be able to navigate.
Correct.
And it's clear, it's beautiful, it's mystical, because you can hold it up to the sun, and you can find the sun. So, and it's life-saving. What a miraculous tool. But what is that doing in an Elizabethan war chest or a navigation box? So that's an interesting link between the Norse nobleman, the French crown, the English crown, and certainly a secret worth fighting for and holding. And that's North America as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that dovetails perfectly into a lot of the information that I've been presenting on this show now for several episodes. So yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense that it would be a part of the heritage of both the French and English crowns, which figure prominently in some of the discoveries I've made.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that, Gretchen. That was really wonderful. Dan Spino, again, with a fantastic question. Hey, Daniel. He says, hi, Gretchen. Do you feel the Templars were retracing the steps of the Phoenician Minoans in investigating the Great Lakes region in relation to copper mining, specifically in the Lake Superior region? Or do you think it was more of a partnership?
Absolutely.
Yeah. He also wants to know, thought of it as more of a partnership between the Vikings and Norsemen, or both?
A partnership between
the Vikings and the
Vikings, Norsemen, or both? What was it?
Yes. Well, proximity, similar resources that are being leveraged. You are going to find a crossover, and of course, I do think that they were all involved in Oak Island. Oak Island is only 160 miles south of the Newfoundland settlement. And right off the coast of Oak Island on the north side, mainland side, you have Gold River. So for a reason.
Right.
And that's an important, valuable resource too.
Oh yeah, great question, Daniel. Well, go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say, and there's been all sorts of speculation that gold could have been a motivation in that area as much as anything else, knowing that the Gold River yielded 475 pounds of gold within the mid 1800s, but there was gold there, I'm sure, prior to, and maybe even gold in and around the Oak Island area, Spanish plunder or otherwise. I think there might have been also natural veins of gold in that area. And there were resources. We know the fur trade was there. We know there were other resources that the New World had. And at this time, Gretchen, you know this, Europe was depleted of natural resources, in the 1500s,
well,
1600s.
Absolutely. The bear was extinct 1,500 years ago
Yeah.
in the British Isles, nearly extinct in France. So there was a huge desire and need for fur. And that is one of the reasons that the French crown sent their junior nobles out to North America. And it was espionage, it was top secret to bring back furs. So, furs were gold.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And also, there's exceptional lumber.
Yes.
But having looked into the early explorers of North America, the hunting was plentiful. You could go out and a tribe could hunt 1,000 deer in a day, and they would be replaced almost immediately. It was a rich place to live. It was bountiful with herbs, with berries, with wood, and they were a prosperous people all the way down the eastern seaboard and into the Great Lakes.
Yep.
They had a sophisticated culture. They just lived differently from ourselves. As Europeans, we like to build buildings and live in buildings, but they had a culture that was probably more akin to the Viking culture, with small dwellings and a longhouse around, in the center of the community. So very similar.
Perfect. Yeah. Go
Gretchen,
ahead, John.
let me ask you this question real quick. In your estimation, I know you and I have talked about this quite a bit. I mean, we're constantly talking. But in your estimation for the viewers, is there a link between the Norse and the Vikings?
A link between the Norse and the Vikings?
And the Norse, the Vikings, and the Templars. Let's just put it that way. The Norse and the Vikings, basically the same thing.
Well, we use the term Vikings as a generic term. And that's, I believe, Rollo is Danish.
Yes.
So
correct.
the Vikings were all along that southern edge.
That's it. That's exactly what we discussed. Yep.
Yeah. So the Vikings, and of course, that's very close to the northern part of the Netherlands, Belgium, France. That's that whole coastline there, and then that strange-looking footless boot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So. And we know that they were going absolutely everywhere. They were in Turkey and Constantinople. They were everywhere.
Sure.
And they were their tips, their craft. And of course, they were various sizes from small to immense, allowed them to penetrate deep inland.
Sure.
Up along the rivers, deep into the heart of Europe and beyond. So yes, it was not a problem for them to go from Norway, Denmark, across the way to that northern edge of French, Belgium, Netherlands. It's just a dawdle.
It would be the northern route all the way through Finland, Iceland, all the way down, instead of directly across, correct?
Absolutely. They would have hopped, island hopped. And of course, the Sinclair come into play there because they're up in the Orkneys, and the Shetland Islands. They have the Jarls of the Orkney, and they would have skipped across that northern island.
Sure,
I do think they went straight across, but perhaps that came later. I think that they would have gone north along the Iceland, Greenland, and down into North America.
Viking trade routes that were established prior to like trips of Cartier, who remarks in his logs 22 days approximately from where he was to the Nova Scotia area. So we know it's about a 30-day travel from Europe to the Nova Scotia area, approximately, give or take. So that makes a perfect sense, because if that wasn't established, you go up and around, and those were established trade routes already with the First Nation and other, persons in the States and in North America.
Yep, very cool.
Makes a lot of sense.
So, tell you what, Gretchen, if you would like, we can kind of you've prepared a short presentation for us today, and you really want to be respectful of your time. If you want to move on to that, we can go ahead and move on to that at this time. Or if I'm loving the information that's coming out of this, because
the questions, my God, look at the questions, Jake.
I know.
We can take some more questions. I'll do my best with that.
Sure.
Then we can move on.
Let's do that. Again, my good friend Jason Mercer asks, Hugh de Payens visited Scotland. He received lands in Scotland. Was he visiting a bloodline family? Did Payens start a family of his own in Scotland? Great question, Jason.
Well, they were all deep into it, and perhaps you know more about this than I do, which is fantastic. I like the idea, and Scotland is and always will be a key player when you bring up the Templars. And yes, it's I think that it's important to note that Hugh de Payens and Bernard de Clairvaux were allies. So absolutely. It's easy to view the Templars in a small bubble. On the History Channel or whatever, you see six guys riding around on a horse. Sometimes they're carrying the ark, and you see them wearing their gear, their cross, and they're walking across the field. And you think of them in this tiny bubble, and not to impugn the academic community, because I use academic techniques to come to the conclusions I have. And it's important to have that high level of accountability and not wander off into fantasy land.
Yes.
But it's, forgive me, I've lost my train of thought slightly. They are all connected by family. The Templars were supported by families over their few hundred years of public existence. And it was an honor to contribute sons, but also anything they needed, from land to money to goods, food, whatever. And it was a family tradition. In fact, I found a family in England that I'm researching that was very proud to be a part and set back from the inner order. You could join the Templars and never set foot up, never get on a horse. Okay, you could end up running a farm. You could be a blacksmith. They had a lay brother system. You could ride with them for 2 years, which I think that Richard the Lionheart did. But this is all family. But the Inquisition and Philip le Bel wouldn't arrest entire families, especially if they had money and they were able to protect themselves to some degree. But it's a complicated web. It's a complicated web.
That's an interesting thought, and it just kind of brought to mind, Gretchen. It's as if it operates, and John, you know where I'm going with this probably, but it sounds as though they operated like an intelligence network. Very much so.
And that
they
was
weren't going around like broadcasting all the time that they were a Templar.
That was there before 1119. Mr. Mercer asked about Hugh de Payens in Scotland and family up there. It's always about family or adopted family. And by that I mean trusting an heir who isn't your blood, mostly male, but sometimes female. And it is about family connection. And the Templars were merchants, and they were trading with the merchant guilds. and they were out of the merchant guilds as well. So you can't have the merchant guilds without the Templars and vice versa. So you have to ask yourself, who is a Templar? How do you quantify that? It gets tricky after a while.
It sure does. Great answer. Great answer. Wonderful. Another question, Daniel Spino with another. Do you feel that Bernard Clarebo was a link between the Templars and the Vikings or Norse?
I haven't been able to establish that. There isn't that much known about his father. We know that he was a knight. His mother is reported to be related to the Counts of Toulouse. So that brings in the Cathar connection.
Oh, okay.
So if you think about Rollo having married into the Merovingians in 825, whatever, that's 200 some odd years, well, 300 years by the time you count the 1119 and the inception of the Templar Knights. For that Norse DNA and that part of the world to have grown. And Bernard de Clarebo was born in the county east of Normandy. So, there is potential there for there to have been Norse DNA. It's possible.
Okay. Yeah. Again, wonderful answer. Daniel Spino just popped on with another question. Daniel, we're going to save that for after the presentation.
That's a great question, though. I'm reading it now. Wow.
Well, that's where I wanted to head with this whole
cool.
interview this evening. So thank you for that. Anything to add, Gretchen, before we move on?
I could talk about various aspects of this all night long.
Knowing
will all go away, and I'll still be talking.
Knowing this audience, that could
very well
happen. So,
Jake, we might be talking about a part 2 at some point.
Yeah,
there's a lot of information.
The more that I do this, the more I discover that we only get through the tip of the iceberg each episode. So, I'm going to go ahead and switch the view here for us, gang, so that I want to get Gretchen's slideshow up, and I'm going to.
Thank you.
Oh, no problem. That John, if you don't mind, that also means that you're going to be looking at the comments for us, if you would.
That's fine. I'm in the comments,
and I'm going to be kind of blind here, so.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and share that, and there you go, Gretchen. You can start you at the beginning, and you can take us over here.
Well, towards the end of my book, my first one, I wanted to find perhaps early evidence of what we would now call Freemasonry. I'm also interested deeply in finding the Templars in evolved forms such as Freemasonry. I am certainly at ground zero when it comes to Francis Bacon, etc. And I look forward to learning more through John Edwards and with you, Jake, and the other knowledgeable people following your group. But I came across what I thought could be a prototype, an unevolved, if you will, medieval tracing board. And I'm asking the question, is this an early concept of that? So my Freemason friends out there, you'll see familiar themes. So the stars of the Magdalene. I found this document conceived by the abbess of a Merovingian abbey. And she, of course, was circa 1130, 1195. And she was within a city called Magdeburg in eastern Germany. Their emperor, and by the way, Charlemagne helped to found that city. And of course, the name rather says it all. And you have the depiction here of Mary Magdalene as the tower, the maiden holding the sword of truth, and also the palm of victory. This is 10 miles down the road from Abbess Herod of Landsberg's Abbey. And proximity is everything when you are a detective, excuse me. As you all know, who are the culprits and what is their circle of travel? So the next slide, please. This is an illumination in an encyclopedia, probably the first Western encyclopedia ever conceived of. And this is Philosophia. And I will have to refer to my book at times, and I've got a copy of the PowerPoint here as well, which I'll lean on. It's been a while since I've looked at this information. So this is a complicated piece. I won't go into all of it. The central circle, the large circle, translates out of Latin. Oh, let me jump back. Forgive me. And I'm sure that you all know the 7 liberal arts were considered by the Greeks to be a complete circle of geometry, astronomy, astrology, arithmetic, rhetoric, music, grammar, and dialecta, or debate. And in the classical world, all 7 arts were necessary to becoming a fierce, combative, and also a good citizen, a citizen that could help your city-state of Greece grow. And of course, this filtered into the rest of Europe as well. So the 7 liberal arts are key to becoming an enlightened soul. And Plato is in the center, and so is Socrates. And of course, we know that Plato was responsible for the mystical school, the Platonian mystical school, and that continued up into Europe, crossing streams with bloodline individuals out of the Holy Land. So the translation is, and forgive me for having to do this, the wise men of the nation, the philosophers of the world, and the clergy that had gone before. These exercises noted that the search for philosophy through investigation and confirmed in writing are suggested for the students, for students. 7 teaches skills through studies of philosophy and explores these elements and hidden things. So, so we're about to find out some of the hidden things.
Excellent.
I believe that I may have come across a few actually accidentally.
Cool.
Okay, so we've gone through the outer ring. If you would forward, he's done it. Okay, debate is an interesting individual. This is tied to Bernard de Clairvaux because he was noted by many writers as being able to bark. And that is a recognition of fierce debate. But he was also a scholar. He wasn't just a browbeating bully. And he did have some sensitivities. As an aside, he went to Cathar country. He did not succeed. In fact, he was ridden out by the nobility there, the knights attached to the nobility. But he did go down there. He was in a Cathar church trying to encourage them to come under his umbrella. And the knights, the Cathar knights outside, Cathar supporting knights, I should say, were making such a racket with their swords on their shields that nobody could hear anything. He basically gave up and left and said that the Cathars needed a great deal of talking to, but that they were the most Christian of them all. So he went down there and tried to talk to them, bark at them. back on track, there's another interesting thought about this. There could be an association with Sirius, the dog star here. That's something to consider when you start looking at the other information coming out of this imagery. So the next slide is arithmetic. And she is depicted with the reddish hair compared to her sisters. The inscription is interesting and a bit disturbing. The differences between the numbers of a monster. So what in the world does that mean? It's a very strange place. And John, I might rope you into this if you would like to participate.
Well, it's just interesting.
There are 7 words there.
Yes.
7. And it relates to the book of Revelation. 7 is important in this. I will break it down further. How about if I do, I'll finish my thoughts on this, which are out of the book. And then if you're up for it, John, we can talk a bit about Revelation if you'd like to.
Sure.
Or we'll hold it off and make everybody wonder what we're talking about. Okay. So we've got 7 words there. And this is all about counting. This is about really drilling down. There are no mistakes in numbers. Let's see, am I losing track of what I'm doing here? No. So she has a string of beads, an abacus, if you will, in her hands. And they number 22. So she has 7 words above her head, which is a warning to look out for monsters. So we have 7 above her head. She's counting 22 in her hand. And one of the beads is obscured by her hand. So the question is, what is this telling us? You have a woman being featured here. The month of July is key to the number 7, and 22 represents the feast day of Mary Magdalene. So that is what I believe we're looking at here.
And Jake, you see my mind going, the differences between the numbers of a monster, the monster being maybe the fictional portion biblically, so forth and so on, or whatever the monster is, whether it be the institution of the church itself or whatever was deemed, but the difference between the numbers for me sets it off. And the fact 22 sitting there is significant. And the fact, I would love to know which, maybe you know this, Gretchen, which one is she covering? Which one of the numbers is she covering?
Oh,
13.
13. Is it 13, Jake? 13, which goes back to the Royal Ark of Enoch, and 13.
I'll let you go with that.
Well, it's just significant because the one that's covered is the one that's hidden. She's covering it because she's hiding that esoteric truth. And
depends on where you go from. Do you go from this side or the other side, and therefore you get 2 different meanings?
Great question. And I don't think it's just 2 different meanings. It's 2 layers of meaning.
It's 2 layers of meaning.
Exactly. Thank you.
And so what happens is I counted from here. And so this means that this is number 9, which is the number of the beast in esoteric circles.
Correct.
It's how you calculate and render the number of the beast 666. You add it together, you get 18. You add those, reduce those by adding those together, you get 9, which is symbolic of man's lower nature, of the soul. It's actually a pictogram of man's soul descending down into the flesh. And then there are the 3 steps of initiation. Then, of course, as John's going to talk about, the ascended master number of 13 of the Godhead. So that's where my mind was going. But this is such a cool image. It really is.
A great image. This in the master being 13, the number of the goddess being 13, the orbits of Venus being 13. If you look at the orbits of Venus around the sun, there's so much going on with the number 13. Royal Ark of Enoch, Masonry 13, esoteric knowledge. And the fact that she has it covered, is interesting. And the fact that I think there's more to this which I haven't really investigated here, Jake, but the differences between the number of the monster you already identified as 9. So I'm wondering if there's more going on with some cipher there.
There is. And to address Gretchen's question,
Sure.
which was what direction are we counting from? Well, when you count from on our right side of the image, her left, the ninth the ninth number is just to the left of her, or right of her left hand, her left. And then she's covering up the number 10 with that hand.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is the number of initiation. And it's hidden. So
that's tremendous.
It's genius. I mean,
yeah.
Tremendous. And of course, she's below an arch and between 2 pillars.
Correct.
Oh, great catch. It is. It's the 2 pillars of masonry, speculative masonry, and she's holding the Royal Ark of Enoch.
There you go.
If that 13 is correct.
Well, also, since there are 22 total, that's also in the Hebrew alphabet, the number of Tav, the sacred Tau, which represents truth.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
That's pretty cool.
That's a great image.
Yeah.
Splendid. Okay. Well.
Wow.
It's fun doing this in real time.
Yeah, I'm just like, what?
I apologize.
It's so much fun.
I've been hearing a lot of static. It might be on my end. Would you like to go forward? Thank you. You have.
Yep. A little bit of a lag there.
Geometry is saying, her arch. I direct the measurements of the earth through many cares. In other words, this is going to be difficult. It's going to be work, and it's going to be a bit of a trial. And she sits between arithmetic and astronomy. Make a note of the staff and the compass. Keep that in your mind. Could you put up the next frame, please?
Sure. There we go.
So, if you take the compass and the staff as measured, I've inserted with the line of her skirt, the letter M.
Genius.
Cool.
So I'll let that sit with you. And please go to the next slide. Astronomy. And her archway translates as is learned by means of which the name of an omen is pulled from the stars. What omen? So that's a good question. She is trying to, let's just do this a different way. Go to the next frame.
Okay.
So in her left hand, she's holding what I believe could be the alabaster jar of Mary Magdalene. And I've taken the liberty of imposing a pink visible background of the constellation of Cassiopeia over the stars that were written above her hand there. Now, granted, it's not a perfect fit, but it is a squished space. Go to the next frame.
Wow.
That is Cassiopeia in the night sky.
Very cool.
And I believe this is a veneration of Mary Magdalene, the Queen of Heaven, in the night sky. Taking Cassiopeia and imposing Mary Magdalene over her, and the North Star being Christ. And so basically you have the throne of heaven, which Mother Mary traditionally sits on. But this time, in this story, it's Mary Magdalene.
And that's also the answer to the, well, in a matter of speaking, the riddle of the name of an omen is pulled from the stars. What I did with the kind of work that I do, the first thing I thought of is the name of an omen. I thought that was kind of an odd way of saying it. And I did a quick calculation in my head, and I believe the value of the word omen in simple cipher is 44, which is the value of Rex. It was used by the Rosicrucians to represent the number of a king. So maybe there's, and it fits in perfectly with the throne of heaven. So that's really pretty interesting.
Wow.
Again,
Interesting.
just speculation on my part, but it just jumped out at me. So pretty interesting.
Yes, I think it is about not judging all of these pieces, but when you put all of the pieces together, it is a rather compelling concept.
It is.
So,
yeah.
but I do believe this is basically saying Sophia, the Sophia of Christ, represents his bride, Mary Magdalene, his hidden bride. And he is the North Pole Star, the unchanging pole star. But this is not only mystical, it's also political. If you bring into it the bloodline and a good, if you accept that you have to be of the nobility, a knight at age 21 to become a Templar, you have to ask who these people are. So are they of an extended bloodline family? Who best to protect this information? An extended bloodline.
Yeah, and this ties in, John, with the work that you were doing with Ascended Master, doesn't it? The unification of opposites, placing Sophia on the throne of Christ.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that whole 9 yards. So this feeds right into the whole Ascended Master theory of, you are God. You are a reflection of God. The God force is within you. And it dovetails just so perfectly into that concept. It's brilliant.
And of course, Cassiopeia revolves basically around the North Star. And it looks like it's upside down at times. So you end up with two M's.
Jake, you know what I'm thinking? The two M's is a reflection as above, so is below. And then you have twins. Again, the inverted M, almost perfectly inverted as above, so is below.
But then of course an inverted M is also a W, and you add the values of that together. We get
absolutely. And if you take, I don't have my diagram here, but if you take the two, a W and an M, and overlay them, you get 3 diamonds. And that's interesting. In the next frame, which focuses a bit more closely on Sophia, she is wearing a crown with 3 presences. So read into that what one might. And there is some thought she may have had 3 children, but John and I were talking about this. In order to become or called rabbi, become a rabbi, you had to be married. And of course, in order to be wise in Judaic ancient culture, you would need to have children as well. So did Mary Magdalene and Jesus get married at a young age and produce quite a few children? Did she travel with him during his 15 missing years? So, it raises many questions. So if you're going to call him rabbi in the Bible, then we're needing to look at what that means. What does rabbi mean?
Yeah. And you have the bar mitzvah at 13.
Oh, excuse me.
I said you have the bar mitzvah at 13, and typically you would be married right after that ceremony because that was manhood or ladyhood and bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah. So Jesus would have been married sometime really early on. The other thing that strikes me, Gretchen, is the 3 faces on her crown, and in symbolic representation of past, present, and future. You are Ascended Master, so therefore there is the world is timeless to you. You have the whole universe at your hands, and that is found not only in the West but also in a lot of Eastern traditions, with the 3 faces of the Buddha facing all 3 different directions: present, past,
that's
future.
marvelous.
So you also have Janus as well in the classical tradition.
Yes.
The gateway,
the gateway, yes.
And the ribbon itself. And the ribbon itself making a huge M as well, the same that you see in Cassiopeia. So it's just fascinating, Gretchen. My God.
So cool.
It's great.
The banner that she is holding here, All wisdom is from the Lord God. Only those who desire the flame of love achieve wisdom. And of course, this is the heart center. And coming out of it are 7 beams or rays of green light.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been much more colorful going back a few centuries. But the 7 rays of knowledge being depicted in green and blue waves coming out of the heart center, which is always seen as the color green. So
that's really interesting.
The reason why I wanted to ask the question is this an early concept? And this document was held in royal hands for a very long time. The archive at the Abbey, for many centuries. And I've got the next screen. It's just a question. I don't consider myself to be a Freemasonic expert by any stretch, but this is the 2nd degree. But I like the pillars. Each muse was between a pillar. You've got the steps, the first 3 steps, and that depicts the plumb, the square, and the level of operative. The 3 instruments being out of medieval architecture, which became speculative. Which speculative is fortitude, honesty, and virtue. And 5 further steps, engaging the whole body, which is what she was trying to tell us in the initial larger image, that here you have to include your hearing, seeing, feeling, smelling, and taste. Your entire body must be engaged on the path of initiation.
Yes.
So, and the next step there, the 7 steps there are the 7 liberal arts. Correct. I've got a quote here by Robert Lomas, a fantastic writer.
Yeah.
Philosophy is the porchway to truth, and its pursuit widens human understanding. So I think that's a very interesting imagery. The medieval imagery there is quite something.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. John, look at the top of the pillars. On the left, you have the earth, and on the right, you have the
heavens,
firmament, the heavens.
The constellations, yes. And in Masonry, you become the middle pillar. You're the pillar of mildness, and you pass through, just like what we saw in Francis Bacon's frontispiece with the ship and the 2 pillars. Yes. You pass through, you become the middle pillar. The first 3 steps are the steps of initiation, the first 3 degrees of Masonry, then the 5, and then the 7 liberal arts, all represent state of mind. So this makes perfect sense with what Gretchen's saying. Symbolically, this makes sense.
Yep, 100%. Very
beautiful.
Cool.
That's awesome.
What a great image.
Awesome. Ho!
Just to change the subject.
Small.
Well, Gretchen, I do have some questions about this, Gretchen. I know we talked pre-show about it. Can I ask you a couple things?
By all means.
Okay. Gretchen and I have gone, we shared quite a bit of research on this, and some of Gretchen's work, Jake, and viewers is brilliant. I want to know, Gretchen, Jake's doing some decoding on this as well, because I presented to him, and some of the stuff he's come up with is fantastic. But you have the Ruchicald name associated with this map. This is Zena Hepburn's map. And so what is the relation with the Ruchicald name and that, and I'm a symbol person, the fish symbol in the corner?
Yes, it is a play on words.
Okay.
Roche means rock. That's quite well known.
Mm-hmm.
Foucault's rock. And the castle does not have foundations. It sits on a massive mound of granite. It's so the Vikings were invading the area. So Foucault, a nobleman, 800 what have you, 900, decided after a Viking invasion of the area, the city of Angoulême, Merovingian city of Angoulême, is downstream from Rochefoucauld. So he built this upstream on a rock to protect the local area. And it is accessible and sits at a crossroads of two small rivers, ready stock of fish. What I did not know until recently, actually, I didn't know until October, that roche also means fish, a type of fish, and it's not found in North America. So it's a play on words. Now, if you look at, and I apologize, I don't have any images, but if you look at medieval heraldry where they try to incorporate a rock into heraldry, it's not very nice. I've seen some lumpy depictions of a rock with other figures around it. It's not very stirring. It's not very exciting. And I came across brown rocks. I came across green covered rocky hillocks, and it's just not edifying. The roche fish is found in Europe, and many noble houses, including the Rochefoucalds, would have used that versus rock. So instead of using a rock as on their shield, they had the mermaid, who has the tail of a fish. And that's a very complex story. So I did take the liberty of going to Rochefoucald Chateau in 2018, and also I went to Talmont, which is in the lower right hand. Does that answer your question in brief, John?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I was still working on this presentation until 6 this evening, an hour before we took off. As it were.
Wow.
So I didn't have time to source all of the imagery that would have assisted in this.
But you see a correlation. You see a correlation with the name, the symbol, and the royal houses of France.
Normally, when you take an illuminated manuscript or any kind of imagery,
Yes.
Going back centuries, you would have had the name of the main patron on there somewhere, because they would have provided the funding to create the illuminated document or manuscript. So at the top, you have Rochefoucauld as the main contributor, if you will. In the lower right, you have the junior house of Talmont. And I wanted to know, where was Talmont, and who was the young lion of Talmont? And of course, the fish does play in there as well.
Jake, you lit up when she said that.
Didn't mean to.
I wondered. There's something there, Jake. That's just maybe. We'll just leave it at that.
Maybe something there. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So going on to the next screen, if you're ready to do that. I didn't mean to dissect the entire map tonight. There really isn't time. But
there it is.
What you're seeing here is the War Room has this. I did present this to them on 2 occasions. They have, this is Rick Lagina's property. He owns, this is his baby that he inherited from Zena. So I'm basing my research off of her book, which legally I'm allowed to do. But I did present this to the War Room, and they've chosen not to air that. But, this is their island, their world, and we just get to play in it briefly and hopefully be mystified and entertained and questioned by what's on Oak Island, as thousands of us are captured. So there it is. That's the ruins of Castle Talmont.
Wow.
Cardinal Richelieu blasted through the area, destroying mile upon mile upon mile of castles and villages and towns and cities. And of course, that's after the Huguenots came through and did the same thing. I tell you, I would not want to have lived there as a born and raised individual of that area. They would have a very, very tough time.
That's for sure.
But that is Talmont Castle, and it was owned by Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the wealthiest women, most important women in Europe, and closely associated with Bernard de Clairvaux. She was present when he preached the Second Crusade on the steps of Vézelay.
Wow.
Dedicated to Mary Magdalene, of course. But she owned this pile of rocks and then passed it to her son, Richard the Lionheart. 6 miles down the road is a Templar property. So I can just see the Lionheart riding out at night to go play poker, get drunk with his Templar friends, perhaps. So if we take the date 1347 that is associated with Zena's map, who's alive at this time? Not Richard the Lionheart, but yes, he was there. But this would be the individual Lord Louis de Tours. And I found this image out of a very old book from the 1800s on heraldry. And this is his heraldry symbol. You have his stag horns with a lion standing between the two sets of horns. And he owned the castle. So I would certainly say he was a young lion of Talmont. He lost the battle with his French aristocrat companions, the Battle of Poitiers, in 1356. And he had no son. His daughter married well, and of course the line continued through the daughter and her new family, French nobles, but the line ended there, unfortunately. And so the title was absorbed by the crown, because it's always the crown that bestows an accolade, an honor. So 200 years pass before another unrelated DNA family are given the title by the King of France. So Lord Tours certainly is an interesting character, because Talmont has its own harbor arm. So they have their own ship, and it's 6 miles away from the Templar Preceptory. So that's highly interesting. Did he travel to Nova Scotia? Did others sail from his castle under his protection? It's a good question. There was a marriage between the Rochefoucauld's in 1099 between his ancestress and the Rochefoucauld family. So there is a blood tie, and since Rochefoucauld Chateau could be considered landlocked, this, however, has a deep water port for a ship. So they would have been natural allies.
Yep.
They are a considerable distance apart. However, with the inner riverways, you can navigate from Rochefoucauld to Talmont. So it is my feeling, on the next frame, you have some idea of the distances involved. And I hand it to our European ancestors for their sheer mettle and toughness for what they did navigate. But we're talking about individuals who inherited Viking ship capacity, shipbuilding, naval capacity. And William the Conqueror took forces across the water, cavalry, in order to take the throne of England.
Yep.
So,
wow.
So quickly, Gretchen, quick question. You said 200 that no one possessed this area for another, or had that title for another.
The title.
The title. So who was it that ended up with the title eventually? 200
I
years
can't
later?
remember.
Okay.
The 1357, when he passed, he did survive the battle of Poitiers. I used to know that information, but I'd have to look it up.
Just put you on the spot. That's all. I was really
Yeah,
curious.
I apologize. I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, but another family did inherit the title 200 years after this Lord Louis Tours passed.
Amazing. But yeah, sorry for the interruption, but yeah, just putting you on the spot quickly, but I was just a little curious, that's all.
I used to know. It'll be in the book.
Okay, awesome.
So there's the seal again.
Oh, there's, okay. Slide
We
behind.
went through that, but it's just a bit fun. You can see Castle Talmud on the coast. Above, no, just north of there is La Rochelle. And you can see La Rochelle in the center lower. As if these people could go by car, that's what the journey would look like. Just to give you some sense of where these locations are related to each other. And of course, Eleanor of Aquitaine also gave property at La Rochelle to the Templars. They practically ran it and owned it, and it was its own city state. It's independently owned and ran, if you will, until Richelieu came through. Cardinal Richelieu put an end to the independence of that city-state.
Wow.
That's my photograph of coming up next, the Chateau de la Rochefoucauld.
Oh, wow, cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I've got hundreds of photos of the interior. To the left, you see what I believe, this is out of their private chapel. I wish the photo was a little bit better. But it is a woman holding a grail cup and the cross, a Madonna figure. And I believe it to be Mary Magdalene. Off to the right is a mermaid. This is Melusine. And she circumnavigates the entirety of the, what is it called? Right. I mean, she's way up it. You can't even see it here. I wish I could show you. Off to the left of in the castle image, see the tower? Go to the left. There's a dark, shadowy overhang, and she's tucked in there repeatedly. She's tucked in under that overhang there. So she's an interesting individual, and she goes straight to the Dark Ages.
Wow.
She came out of Brittany around 500, filtered south into the Lusignan family, powerful French family, and into the Rochefoucaulds. And there is a marriage between the two families as well. The Lusignans were the first to write the legend of Melusine down, so we have to turn to them first. But Melusine is stamped all over the chateau. I also found a mermaid carving similar to this one above the portal of a Templar Knight church in Ventouse, which is just a half an hour away by car to Rochefoucauld. And there are quite a few Templar chapels in the direct area. They would have basically been in Templar Central, if you want to put it that way.
Oh, yeah.
So if you've got a mermaid over your portal of your church, it means a couple of things. Either you may have inherited an undeclared son, or you were benefiting from money, food supplies, hoard, etc. So the Rochefoucaulds had patroned the Templars at some point. Exactly how, we don't know. Records don't survive to discuss that. So Melusine, who is she? I will talk about the legend, and this is going to be in the next book. Melusine is in her forest, minding her own business, when she comes across a battered, handsome knight. So she heals him, and he thinks she's insanely beautiful. So he says, I'm going to marry you. And she says, all right, because she's quite taken with him, under one condition, you do not come into my chambers on Saturday. And he doesn't understand the significance of this. He says, oh, that's it, that's fine, no problem. So they marry, they're happy, and she has extraordinary capacities. She magics up a field filled with beautiful silken tents because everyone is curious about this woman. Even the king of France is curious. So all these aristocrats flood into the wedding. So she has to come up with all these magical tents and feasting. And of course, you want to entertain your guests in the manner in which they deserve. So she always prefaces each step by saying, almost as if she has to, all this is through God because I'm a Christian. So she's embraced by the community, by everyone. She's graceful, gracious, she's humble, and everyone falls in love with her. And it is reported to build a castle within a week and a church within a week, and prefacing with, yes, this is from God, I'm a Christian. They have 2 beautiful daughters, and their legend grows. So her brother, not her brother, his brother shows up, and he's feeling jealous. You know, he's married, his brother is married this amazing woman. So as soon as you reach any kind of a status in life, and I'm not sure I want to say status, but if you have any kind of a blessing, human nature, somebody else is going to either try to acquire it or ruin it. So the brother says to the lucky groom, well, you're a bit of a muppet. How do you know she's not getting it on with somebody, you know, in her own chambers on Saturday? And plants an evil seed. So, you know, the groom, the handsome bride gets chews on that a little bit, and then finally says, okay, enough's enough, I've got to go look. So he spies on her through a crack in the door and is shocked to see the entire lower half of her body as a mermaid tail. And she realizes she has been discovered, and, you know, she throws her hands up in the air, is horrified, transforms into a dragon, and flies away, never to return. So she's brokenhearted, he's brokenhearted, and the brother, damage done, walks away. And their kingdom withers because its central light has gone. So what do we make of that? A few clues. Why Saturday? What does that mean? Well, that is the sacred day of the Judaic community, the holy day of Judaism.
It's a Sabbath. Yeah.
It is the Sabbath, yes. And so here you have a direct allusion to the Holy Land and the Judaic Davidic line. The tail representing capacity to navigate the inner planes through traditions brought from the Holy Land as taught by to Jesus by the Essenes and John the Baptist. So we're talking big heretical stuff here. So this is a line of transmission into Europe, and she has to flee potentially for her life and for the knowledge that she holds, so that she can continue to pass that on. This is another interesting story, because the first Merovingian king has 2 fathers. A water beastie, a being that looks like Poseidon, perhaps. Again, same concept.
Right.
So, and that brings us back around to the stars of the Magdalene, venerating her as Cassiopeia, And there's no accident, it is in Germany. Bernard de Clairvaux has a relationship with Germany. He donates his crozier to Speyer Cathedral in Germany that is dedicated to Magdalene. That's quite the big step. And of course, he has a relationship with the Black Madonna as well. And to kind of fast forward this, hopefully to tie this up, there are all sorts of potentials and levels to the Black Madonna. You have Elizabeth I wearing white and marrying England, and she is the fairy queen. So, and this is, of course, coming around to the expertise of your own group, Jake and John. So that element of the mermaid symbolism, anytime you see a fish tail, you're talking about the inner world. So.
Interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting.
I'm going to take a brief moment.
And there you go.
Wow.
That is just, I've always found that myth to be very fascinating. And your explanation of it just now was excellent. Thank you for that. That ties in pretty well with some of our thoughts on occasion. John?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because this almost becomes a symbol for esoteria as being passed down. When you see this, it could be bloodline related. It could be, diffusion of esoterica from the time of the Templars. And I guess the follow-up question in my mind that I'm thinking about it is, does the symbol and what it represents threaten the Vatican?
Absolutely. You have two churches alongside, and Peter is, Mary Magdalene says in one of the, is it the Nagamati that was discovered? I'm afraid of Peter. He hates my race.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, that was today, culture is very, very strict. No religion is born out of the ground, complete understanding with completely nailed down. And, Jesus was a very exceptional individual, as was his cousin, John the Baptist, that the Templars chose as their patron saint. So, it's a very misogynist culture. But if Mary Magdalene is important for men and women, she symbolizes divine union. The divine male, the divine feminine, under the umbrella of Godhead, and the perfectly balanced alchemy between the two forces. Whether it's achieved between a couple or whether it's achieved within the individual, which is also what is taught, because not everybody is blessed with that equal magnetic polar opposite that can match their psyches and internal energy together.
So that goes along with the ascendant master theory of, ascending with this esoterica. And for me, I've always wondered if this is what the Templars knew and they were preaching it or purporting this kind of, esoterica and really, in the church's mind, forbidden knowledge. Would that have been enough to round them up and kill them on 1307?
Absolutely. If you think the Church of St. Peter, and I am not anti-Catholic. No, I have no desire to shift anybody away from their faith. What I would say is there are 35,000 different Christian sects in the world. I might be able to tell you the difference of maybe 4 or 5. So no, but I can't count that high as to what all the differences are. 35,000. Go look it up. So the Church of St. Peter, the Catholic Church, became insanely wealthy for a reason. They had the sword, and Peter has a sword. He's told Peter, put down your sword. And that is also interesting because swords are an elite weapon. You don't just get handed a sword. That's an expensive weapon. So these were people that had some standing. They weren't broke. They were political. They had means. They might have been wealthier merchant fishermen. But the sword is a clue there of wealth, and of course, carpenter also means master. It's a
Yes.
mistranslation.
Yes.
So he's a master of the royal house of David, but he's exiled. So he goes out learning wisdom for 15 years, perhaps with the Druids. Does he meet the Buddhists, the Essenes, the Magi, the Zoroastrians? The three Magi figure prominently in his births, the astronomers, the astrologers. So what this all teaches is that you are directly responsible for your inner path and connection to the great divine, God, the all that is. Whether that, and you are to marry that power, that force, as an individual. But the Church of St. Peter has inserted an intermediary. You have to become saved through the priest. By the way, I'd like 10% of your earnings. So, which is what that's about. If you've got an organization that has huge buildings, you've got a large clergy, they like to wear silk, they like jewels, that costs a lot of money.
Right. And the story you just told too, Gretchen, ties in perfectly because it's John, I saw the look on your face.
Yeah. Because
it's the perfect symbol and allegory for Francis Bacon as well, that he would have used as an emblem for sure.
It's what Gretchen said, Jack. I just throw this in. She said it was a master in exile, which is almost what Francis Bacon was in Birthright, where he followed the mystic arts and not the throne, and basically advocated that to James I. So it wasn't officially advocated, but it's that it went to James I due to choice, and he stayed in quote exile to study the mystical arts, which is exactly what Gretchen just said in a nutshell, which is genius.
It is so cool. And Jason, with a follow-up question for you, Gretchen. Templars have a connection to John the Baptist, St. John. Is there a Templar connection to Apostle Paul? You were talking about Peter. Do you know of any connection, he's wondering, to Apostle Paul?
I am not aware of that, but there's always something more to learn. It's really difficult to know everything in this subject because it's so wide, it's so vast. And if you want to be a master at it, you have to zero down on a particular area, which is what I've chosen to do. But no, I'm not aware of that.
Thanks for that.
But Andrew, of course, is the ex of Scotland.
Yes.
And I do think there's a bloodline tie with the Stuarts. And it's always easy to discount the feminine side of nobility when because that's 50% of your competition.
Yep. Exactly.
But the Judaic culture, the line is always through the woman. But in Europe, it's through the man. So as soon as you have a female heir, most of the time she's edged off the chessboard. So in favor of the male side. And
speaking of which, sorry to interrupt, but this is the perfect segue into an area I was really hoping you could shed a little bit of light on in terms of the Medici connection. It's one of the areas that I'm very interested in, especially in terms of how this information would have been conveyed through that particular bloodline. And I know you had written about that in your book. So.
Yes, that's a challenge for me. I have scratched the surface of what is available for the Medicis.
Yeah.
I did meet an individual claiming descent, and he's been very unwell recently. Prefers to be a background person for the way to protect his own family, But
Sure.
yes, he actually donated quite a lot to my first book.
Oh, wow.
And I found him weirdly accurate in many ways. John and I have actually been doing a lot of discussion on the Medicis. I'm just going through my head at the moment here, trying to figure out how to. Let's go to Caldbeck in Cumbria for a moment. Caldbeck is spelled Caldbeck, and that is an interesting area. The whole area is actually quite rural and ties in with a how do I frame this quickly? On Caldbeck and the surrounding area, I was doing a lot of searching on the Ordnance Survey map, and I've never encountered anything like this. Head, when you talk about it in terms of rivers, so it's the head of the river, right? So I found an area scattered with the word head in all sorts of different names, pinpointed down to one area, about 40 names. Head this, head that, head this, head that. But they weren't all rivers. They were different landmarks, like a tree stump, all these different landmarks, beginning with the term head. And the only reason for that is John the Baptist. So this is on an Ordnance Survey map of the extended Caldbeck area. If you were to go from Caldbeck, Cumbria, which is a national park, a rural environment, and head east on the Pennines, I know you don't know where this is, you're going to find a chapel dedicated to John the Baptist right on a straight line, east to west. But it's a phenomenal area. There are not many landmarks left. Time is cool.
Of course.
But Caldbeck is interesting in the way that it relates to Nova Scotia. In New Ross, a couple miles away from New Ross is Colbeck, K-O-L, Beck, Caldbeck, Colbeck.
Right.
And the area in Cumbria I'm talking about had been a fluid border with Scotland. And there is in the broader area, Furness Abbey, that had been sacked twice by Robert the Bruce. His father he sacked it, even though his own father was buried there. I know this is swaying away from the Medicis, but I just wanted to alert you to that tie from what had been a Scottish holding at one point of Caldbeck in Cumbria and an apex on an energy map. We're getting a bit fuzzy here. An energy map that was given to me that goes straight from here to across the water. But Caldbeck and Colbeck are really fascinating. And John and I are working on a future project regarding further Medici information. So I am drawing a blank here as to how I wanted to take this forward and go forward with this. Forgive me.
That's fine.
Yeah, I would like to steer away from that for now because I'm not prepared or ready to give you more because we're not ready.
I totally get it. that was the easy answer.
They are ready. And I've recently come across an individual. I've been talking to Luca Santoni, who's from Livorno, Italy, whose family is related to the Medicis. Cool. So I recently encountered him, and he's a documentary filmmaker. If you look up Luca Santoni, he did a fantastic documentary, and this is new information for the English-speaking world. He it's the short film is an hour and 10 minutes, and it focuses on the Leonardo da Vinci link to Lervona, the Medicis, who built the city, and the Templars. And it's an hour and 10 minutes long.
Wow.
And you can buy it off of Vimeo for like $10. It's on video. It had been for free on Amazon Prime. I don't know if it still is. But we'll be working with him hopefully this next summer if COVID doesn't ruin everything. But he's coming to England. And he worked with Corian Mall as well in the second installment. He's doing like 6 different installments. And he's done something like 85 documentary short hour-long movies in his career, but he has, like all of us that get swept up in Templarism in this world, it grabs you and you use your gifts to explore the themes further. So,
wow, great to know. And I definitely wrote down his name. I'm going to be checking that out for sure. Our viewers, if you didn't catch that, his name is Luca Santoni, and I think that's something for all to look at.
Lucacenti Santoni, I believe. Here, let me spell that correctly for you.
Excellent.
Thank you for waiting.
Oh, not at all. While we're waiting, I want to throw up this comment from one of our usual.
Luca Santoni, Lucacentoni. And he's definitely on Vimeo. I'm sorry, I should get you that link for afterwards. Maybe if you give me a minute, I can find it for you right now. Would that be best?
Sure.
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds.
Wow.
You got it. So while we're waiting, Awoken One, thanks for this. He says, I haven't been this speechless or as swept away at a tsunami of information since Jake and John revealed someone wrote encoded messages throughout the Bible that Francis Bacon was here. That's pretty much what it says. Awoken One. Thanks for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I get through a couple of comments. And Jason Mercer commenting 1347 must be close in date to the Kensington Stone, perhaps.
That was 1362. If the translation is correct.
Right. Yeah. So he's saying that it would be
we're only talking
close.
a couple decades here.
Exactly.
Thank
you.
I have it for you. Just give me 2 seconds.
Oh, great. Okay, good.
I've just messaged it to you, Jake. That's the link on Vimeo for his stuff. It's new material. I was just in awe watching this documentary because of the language gap. We here in the Western world just do not know this content yet. And he's also done an amazing job of exploring Rennes-le-Château.
Oh, wow.
So,
everyone.
So he'll be here next summer, hopefully. And from what I understand, he is looking for producers as well.
Yeah. So everyone, Gretchen just kindly added that link here at the bottom of our chat. So anyone who would like to check that out, there it is. Thanks so much for that. So, all right, looking through other questions. A lot of great observations, gang.
So there is a great deal more in my first book that I've covered. So I'm obviously hoping you'll go buy my book.
Hear that, everyone? Yeah, and I saw on your webpage that you had a little bit of a snafu with the ordering site. I had tried to order one of your copies and experienced the snafu you talked about. So you had also put up a post that has been corrected and you're good to go. So I wanted everyone to know that.
It is I do have hardbacks and paperbacks I've taken thousands of photographs across Western Europe, and I've been encouraged by a good friend that I needed to do something with them other than them being locked in a book. So I've put them out as decorations. I don't mean to belittle the topic at all, but my photography published in a different form as magnets, as puzzles, and I'll just bring this up. If we're looking for something else to discuss. Can you see that? Wait.
Oh, there it is.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm doing this in reverse. This is a carving of potentially the last Grand Master of England.
Oh,
and
cool. Wow.
He, of course, was imprisoned in the Tower of London. So I just thought I would share this with you. I think I might be the only author that has this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting image. It's about the size and length of my palm. It's in the St. Martin Tower in the Tower of London grounds. It's actually a gift shop now. So, I paid my entry fee, and the clerk opened the glass container. It's actually behind a jewelry case, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Was there anyone
so this
interested?
gift shop had been the cell of potentially the Grand Master of the English Order.
That's amazing.
So there it is.
This, yeah. So John and I are we're kind of giggling because we have some information we've been sharing on the side here too. That we're not.
It's interesting.
Down now, but
it's just interesting to think about who was kept in the Tower of London at one time, and I wonder,
who could it be?
Who could it be? Could it be
more info for another time? Could it be?
Exactly. It's crazy.
I just thought I would drop that on you, and I just think it's amazing.
Thanks, Gretchen.
You've got the Templar cross. You've got we would call these pellets, but they're coins, and the kite shield in between each arm of the cross.
Wow.
So it's an interesting object. It is. So I was quite shocked to have.
Thanks so much for sharing. You
just
kind of blew us away a little bit there.
Wow.
That was really great, Gretchen.
That was a great gem.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's my passion.
Oh, for sure. And you can tell why. And you're so incredibly well versed and knowledgeable. This was a real pleasure. So listen, gang, everyone who's watching live, and we'll be getting a lot of views after the fact for sure as well, Gretchen. So make sure you head over to your website, which is GretchenCornwall.com, and you can access all of her books and other really cool designs. The ornaments, everything. As you kind of scroll through each one you come across, you say, "Oh, that's really cool," and then all of a sudden you come across another and say, "That one's cool too." It just kind of keeps going. So I love your stuff, love your information. And you were such a great guest. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
A lot of fun.
I started a project for Patreon, and I'm grateful to my patrons. I have a few very keen patrons, which have actually inspired a few more different projects, which are forthcoming. One is based on the Pre-Raphaelites. I'll leave you with that. There is a connection.
Very cool. That's intriguing for sure. All right. Anything else you want people to know? Call to action. What would you like us to do?
Well, if you are interested in exclusive content when it comes to the Pre-Raphaelite project, you can join Patreon for anything from $1 upwards. That didn't start out to be strictly about the Pre-Raphaelites. Basically, I'm going to start writing in January, which is why I started my Patreon account. And asking patrons to support me through the writing process. So we all have a COVID story. Mine was that I supported my mother through lockdown, and the funds that could have been there for myself that I had in savings to support me through writing went to support both of us for 14 months. So I'm a bit shy on the ground, but it was for a worthy cause, and I would do it again. But yeah, so I've started a Patreon account as a result. So
great.
I've probably got 4 or 5 projects on a back burner. John, is there anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I really thank you for appearing today, and you were fantastic as usual, and we really benefited from what you had to say and your insights. And the last bombshell kind of left me again a little speechless, which happens on the show for whatever. Yeah, happens on the show for whatever reason. So thank you so much for your time today, Gretchen.
Yeah, Gretchen, thanks so much. This was everything I thought it would be and more. So thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and sign off here, gang. And thanks for joining us this post-holiday afternoon. What a great way to spend my afternoon with all of you. So thanks again.
Me too.
And,
thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye, gang.